Do you have a player comp for Cullen Potter? And would you say he's more likely to play wing? I personally think Potter is pretty clearly a center type guy. I mean, look, I think he played center all year last year pretty much. Like almost every game I saw, he was by and large up the middle of the ice. I think this touches on an interesting point. It's hard to argue, but it's more of a discussion. How do you perceive the job of your centers on a hockey team? Outline the job that you need your guys to have and be able to do up the middle. And I think that there are multiple different reasonable answers. And as long as you sort of build your team and build your systems around your beliefs and your strategy, then it might end up just coming out in the wash if you have the right players in the right spots, right? Like I look at a guy like Cullen Potter. I see a guy who thrives in open ice, right? Maybe one of the best skaters in last year's draft that didn't go in the top couple of picks, like in terms of explosiveness, speed, the combination of that speed and the skill level that he has, those are tremendous foundational building blocks to work with, right? He's not the biggest guy in the world, and I definitely would have liked a little bit more physical intensity here and there. I feel like the center's job in my books is more off puck open ice focused. You fall back in your own end a little bit. You monitor passing lanes. If your defenseman drives into the corner to muck it up a little bit, you're there in puck support situations, or you're covering the front of the net if both of your defensemen are below the goal line. It's situational awareness like that. And I don't remember Potter getting sort of caught with his pants down in situations like that last year all that much. And considering he was a 17-year-old all season long last year, pretty much playing at a pretty good school, that team in ASU was pretty good. I think that there's a good player there. But the thing is, I feel like a lot of NHL teams would disagree with me on that type of a job for a center, right? I think the big thing people would be curious about and concerned about is face-offs with a guy like him, which I think there's some level of fairness to that argument. I remember talking to someone years ago who was a video coach in the CHL. We were just going over some video because I was curious about behind the scenes, like how do you sort of run these things? How do you study this? Like what are you breaking down? How do you communicate it to the players? Yada, yada, yada. And he was talking about face-offs and how they think about face-offs. And he basically kind of said winning a face-off is important. Like it's ideal. Obviously, if you gain possession off of a face-off, even if you have a really good guy in the face-off circle in terms of like the puck goes towards your team, if you have a weak link on that line, it's going to go in the opposite direction. The really important thing, what you do immediately following a face-off. Hockey is sometimes a set play sport, especially off of a face-off, right? Teams really want to have a system implemented of who goes where after a face-off is won and lost. So part of the game is like pre-scouting the opposing team's strategy in those situations and building something to counter it. If the other team has a certain thing, you have to know what that thing is and work around it and put your so in that sense it kind of nullifies, or at least could nullify, a big chunk of how being good in the face-off circle gives you an advantage. It's not me saying like NHL people are wrong, but it's just sort of explaining why I see things the way I see them. There's more to it at center than winning faceoffs. There's more to it than being the guy that's standing in front of the net chipping in when your defensemen aren't there. So for me with Cullen Potter, it's like I want a guy like Cullen Potter, even if he is that sort of puck support, off puck focused defense or defensive center in his own end and not the most physically intense guy. I want a guy in that situation who can get the puck from the guy along the boards, the guy's doing the grinding, flip the puck out to him, it squirts out, gets to him, and he's off like a rocket. He is either moving his feet and getting it out of dodge, or head up, turns around, finds an outlet pass, and bang, tape to tape hits it, right? And that's what I mean by like stitching a line together, right? Defenseman to wingers. That's my idea of a center, right? It's why I loved Berkeley Catton so much. Get the puck from the defenseman, scan and be aware of where your boys are, and get up the ice somehow. That is the goal. You are responsible for driving the puck through the neutral zone and getting it into the offensive zone. And once you're in the offensive zone, that's the fun part, right? Like Cullen Potter in the offensive zone, in terms of on paper, I had no problems with him whatsoever. To me, it's a matter of like strategy, just discussing that strategy. Obviously, you can point to him and go, he can't. It's very easy to point to a guy like Cullen Potter and go, you can't play center in the NHL. It's just not going to happen because you're not big enough. Fair enough. Like that. Okay. If that's the strategy and that is your viewpoint, okay. But I don't think you're going to get the best version of him. It's the same as Brad Lambert, right? Like Lambert is not a winger. I don't think he's an NHL winger. He shouldn't be. Because it's that sort of, as long as he's got that off-puck awareness in his own end, which is I think good enough, and he has the skating ability and the skill to like get pucks moving. I will never forget watching him in Liga at 17 or 18 and the stark differential in how effective he was playing up the middle of the ice with Jyväskylä and going back home to Lahti and switching to the wing and needing to play in more of a structured system there. It just didn't feel right. And the numbers reflected that. So I look at a guy like Cullen Potter and I go, I can see why NHL teams didn't want him. He's tough to put in a paradigm. He's tough to put in a bubble of like, this is your job in the NHL if you're a typical NHL coded person. But this is kind of why I'm so curious about Calgary, right? Because a number of times in the last 2 seasons especially, they have drafted just zippity-doo-dah skill offense guys. And the rest, they just kind of go, we'll figure it out. Parek is a huge one. Potter is a huge one. Stockselius is a huge one. There's a number of players that they've drafted. Even the twice undrafted guy they drafted out of the OHL. Luke Misa is another one. These are guys that most of them I have seen, obviously not Parek. I've seen them do stuff where I go, man, if you just love to have fun and if you love the exciting side of hockey, the Flames are just leaning into that really hard. And I don't think there's another team in the last 2 years that has really done it to the same extent. And that's what I really appreciate about them. And so it's no surprise to me that Cullen Potter ended up in Calgary now in retrospect, right? Him and Cole Reshny. It was Reshny, I believe, right? Like that went there with him. And like Reshny, Potter, and Stockselius, like if you're a team that barely missed the playoffs and those are the 3 guys off your list in the first 2 rounds of the draft, I think you're having a good time. I think you're laughing. I'd be very curious to talk to Craig Conroy about that aspect of it or their scouting director or someone who is in the weeds on that stuff, because it just is apparent to me that seems to be what is going on there. We'll see where it goes, but I think he does have a huge amount of potential. And I think Calgary's the right place for him. And I hope it's up the middle of the ice, because I see why they might not, but I see guys like Potter as very interesting ideas up the middle of the ice at the NHL.